Hello, welcome back to the shop. It's been a little bit since I've had a video up on the channel, so I thought I'd take some time to document some of the progress I've made on Project RSQ, my 1989 Isuzu Trooper RS. It is off jack stands now, finally, as you can see behind me, and I have gotten a few of the small projects checked off of the list. Let's take a look here and go through some of the stuff that I've done. So, this weekend, I am working on the windshield frame primarily. I did start this weekend to make some of the dash repairs. The repairs are actually complete to the dash now, but while the dash was out, since it had a cracked windshield, I thought it would make the most sense to replace the windshield while the dash was out, being that the seal fits pretty tight up against the dash along the bottom, and the 4 screws that hold the dash in can be stubborn. So I thought I'd get the windshield out, take the screws out, get the dash out, fix it, put the windshield back in, and then put the dash back in once the windshield was in. I did discover some surface rust underneath the windshield seal. Up here at the top, there were 3 bigger than pinhole, smaller than a dime rust holes. I sealed those rust holes up with some auto marine sealant. It's got 2 coats of paint and a coat of primer on it. Everything got wire wheeled, and I picked at it, trying to get as much of the scale and rust off of there as I can before it got painted. So it'll be nice and fresh when the seal goes in, and hopefully get a real good seal on it then, and try and slow the aging process of this old car. So that's what's going on this weekend. With the dash repair, I think I talked about in the previous video that the pigtail for the gauge pod on the dash, somebody took the gauge pod out at the junkyard and they cut the pigtail, so that had to be fixed. At the same time, they cut the HVAC cable that sits right next to it. That's the cable that controls the vents, so that had to be fixed too. A few notes on this project. I was able to pull the cable out of this control module here. While I pulled it apart, I did notice really the only thing different about these control modules is this little cover. Everything else is the same, so that cable swapped right in, and I think I could have just swapped this cover over onto the other one and it would have operated my AC. There's only really this one wire difference here, and there's like 2 extra pots on this clip that this little ball touches there. Anyway, I replaced the cable and reused the one that was supposed to be there. This harness came out of a 90. It is exactly the same part number. The part number tags were still on it, so I matched up the part number. I double checked every clip. All have the same amount of pins and everything. They do use some different colored plugs in some spots, but they're the same plugs. They're all wired for AC, so this little wire was just taped up to the wiring harness there, so I just had to untape it, plug it in. That's the only difference in the wiring harness. Everything else is exactly the same. So that all went back together. The dash is ready to go back in. Once my silicone dries, I want to put another dab of silicone on it before I'm done, and then get the windshield in it, and then the dash can go back in, and I'll have gauges. The main thing reason I wanted to get this done is before the first startup. That's where my oil pressure gauge is. That's where my temp gauge is. When I start this thing up, I want to make sure it doesn't get overheated and I got good oil pressure. So getting those gauges addressed first was important to me. While I was in here, I did get the ignition that had to be drilled apart to get it home from the junkyard. That's all put back together. I threw the brake pad was pretty worn out on it. These are universal brake and clutch are, so on the parts rig the clutch pedal was in really good shape, so I swapped that onto the brake pedal while I was there, just make it a little bit nicer everywhere I can with the parts that I got. It's got a blue fender hanging on it here now from the blue parts car. That's just hanging there. So I got sick of leaning on the pokey stuff, so that'll still have to come off and get painted black to match the rest of the rig. And I gotta fix the factory fender flare and glue some trim on it. So that's a project for another day. The door I did get straightened out where it was bent down there. I did find out on the door that the nutserts for the upper hinge are popped out. I got that all straightened out, but I'm gonna have to take the inner door panel off and bolt that hinge in place from the inside. So we'll see how that goes for me. I think that can be done though. Anyway, it does have an engine in it now. The engine install is not complete. It's all bolted in. Exhaust is all bolted up. It just needs the radiator put back in, and vacuum hoses, power steering pump has to be bolted up, all the belts put on. But once the engine got in, I needed to focus on getting the parts rig out of my shop. I literally put the engine in so I had somewhere to store it because I didn't have anywhere to store it. So I just put it in here. Here's the parts rig. Not much left. Even hardware is so expensive nowadays that I saved every nut and bolt I possibly thought I might use at a later date off of this thing. So I cut floor panels out of it for future fuel pump repairs. Took as much as I could off of this parts rig, so there's very little left. So anyway, I've made some good progress on this. The engine's in, dash repairs done, working on the windshield repair. It does have a gas tank in it now, so the gas tank that they drilled out at the junkyard is fixed. It's all painted up nice underneath there. While I was under there and had it on jack stands, the rear leaf spring bushings and shackle bushings were replaced, rear shocks were replaced, so rear suspension is fairly dialed in as well. Also, while it was up on jack stands, they drain all the fluids at the junkyard, so SAE 30 weight oil in the tranny and transfer case. It calls for SAE 40 in the book. SAE 40 is quite a bit more expensive and not available in the gallon. I could only get it in quarts locally, so I'm running SAE 30. A lot of guys run SAE 30 Shell Rotella in these with no problems. So that's what I put in it. Got 80-90 weight in front and rear diffs, so all the fluids are fresh on it. I just got to keep working on this list here. As you can see, I got a big list on the back, and I just recently had to switch pieces of paper because the list just kind of kept growing. Things would get crossed off, turned into a big mess, so I made myself a brand new list. As you can see, I got the spare tire carrier off. I did discover some damage to the back door underneath the spare tire carrier. I'm going to give an attempt at straightening it out. If it doesn't straighten out, the parts rig has a decent door I'll throw on it. So that's what's going on with the RS. That's my update, and we'll call this part 2. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.